This week in our Missing series, we focus our attention on a little girl named Ava Grace Baldwin. She was just 6 years old when she was reported missing from her elementary school in Texas.
There is one name connected to Sean Diddy Combs that has largely disappeared beneath the avalanche of lawsuits, allegations, court testimony, and internet speculation. Ava, a young girl who once appeared publicly alongside Diddy and his children. A girl Diddy introduced as his adopted daughter. And now, years later, people are asking a very simple question. Where is she? The story of Ava Grace Baldwin has become one of the strangest and most misunderstood side stories connected to Diddy's public image. Online, people have connected her disappearance from the spotlight to his legal troubles and created increasingly dark theories about what she may have witnessed or experienced. But separating confirmed facts from speculation is essential. Because Ava was a child when she appeared in Diddy's world. She is not a public figure, and there is no publicly established evidence that she was a victim, witness, or participant in any criminal activity connected to Diddy. Still, one particular video continues to raise questions. Why did Diddy publicly describe a family friend as his adopted daughter? Why was she telling a story about being picked up from the streets? And why did that moment become so uncomfortable to watch years later? This is the story of Ava, the strange adoption video, and the questions that remain unanswered. But as we go through this story, there is one line we should not cross. Questions are fair. Evidence matters. But speculation should never be turned into fact, especially when the person at the center of the story was a child. So let's go back to where this entire mystery began, the video that started everything. In 2020, Diddy appeared on Instagram Live with several of his children. The atmosphere was casual. They were laughing, talking, and interacting with viewers. But sitting among them was a young girl who immediately caught people's attention. Diddy introduced her as Ava. At one point, he told viewers that she was his adopted daughter. Then Ava began telling a story that sounded unusual. According to the conversation, she described being on the streets before Papa Combs decided to take her in and let her stay with his children. Diddy reacted to the story, joking that it sounded a little suspect, but he continued playing along with the adoption narrative. He described himself as taking her in and helping her. At one point, he also discussed the idea of her having a black parent and becoming part of the family. The interaction ended with Diddy affectionately referring to her using the Combs name. At the time, many viewers probably saw it as another eccentric celebrity moment. Diddy was known for creating dramatic social media content. His children were often featured in his posts, and the entire exchange appeared playful. But years later, after Diddy became the subject of major legal cases and public allegations, people started watching the same video differently. The tone suddenly felt different. The story about a child being rescued from the streets. The use of the Combs surname. The suggestion that she had been adopted. And the way Ava appeared to navigate the story while surrounded by Diddy and his children. For some viewers, what once looked like a joke began looking like a carefully staged performance. But was it actually an adoption? The answer, according to reports at the time, appears to be no. Was Ava actually Diddy's adopted daughter? Reports citing sources close to the situation stated that Diddy had never legally adopted Ava. According to those accounts, the adoption storyline was essentially a joke or skit that had been misunderstood by viewers. The reports explained that Ava's parents were friends of Diddy's late partner, Kim Porter. Ava had reportedly known Diddy's twin daughters, Delilah and Jessie, for years and was close to the family. In other words, Ava was reportedly not an abandoned child rescued from the streets. She had parents. She had her own family. And Diddy was not her legal father. That explanation resolved one major question, but it created several new ones. If the adoption was simply a joke, why was the story presented so publicly? Why use the image of a child being rescued? Why encourage the adoption narrative in front of a massive audience? And why have Ava tell the story herself? There may be a perfectly innocent explanation. It may genuinely have been nothing more than an awkward family joke that looked much stranger when viewed years later. That is entirely possible. But because Diddy has since faced serious allegations and criminal charges, old footage involving him is now being re-examined under a completely different lens. And context changes how people interpret everything. The problem is that once a public figure becomes associated with serious allegations, every old video suddenly becomes evidence in the court of public opinion, even when it has nothing to do with the actual criminal case. That appears to be what happened with Ava. A family friend, not a missing child. One of the biggest misconceptions online is the idea that Ava suddenly vanished. There is no confirmed evidence that she disappeared or that she is missing. Her family appears to have kept her private, and because she was a child, that may be exactly what they should do. Not every person connected to a celebrity is required to maintain a public presence. Ava is not an influencer. She is not an entertainer. She is not a public official. And she does not owe the internet an explanation about where she is, what she is doing, or whether she still has contact with anyone connected to Diddy. However, her absence from social media and public appearances has allowed speculation to grow. Some online users have suggested that her family distanced themselves from Diddy after his legal problems intensified. That is possible. But unless her parents publicly confirm the reason, it remains speculation. Others have suggested that Ava may know something about Diddy's private life. Again, there is no publicly established evidence proving that she is a witness in his criminal case. There is also no confirmed information showing that she was placed in protective custody or hidden by authorities. These theories have become popular because mystery attracts attention. And in the age of viral content, "Where is Ava?" is a far more dramatic headline than the simpler possibility. A private family may simply want to keep their child away from one of the biggest celebrity scandals in the world. Still, the strange adoption video remains. And that is where the questions continue. Why was the adoption story necessary? This is arguably the most interesting part of the Ava story. Not because it proves criminal activity. It doesn't. But because it reveals something about celebrity image-making. Diddy built much of his public identity around success, luxury, family, and philanthropy. He was not only presented as a music mogul, he was also presented as a father, a businessman, a mentor, a cultural icon, and someone who cared about young people. So imagine how powerful the image of an adopted child could be. A billionaire celebrity supposedly sees a struggling little girl. He brings her into his family. She becomes friends with his children, and he gives her a new life. That is an extremely powerful story. The problem is that it apparently was not real. According to reports, Ava already had parents and had simply been close to Diddy's family for years. So why create the rescue narrative? Was it an attempt at humor? A spontaneous joke? Or simply another example of a celebrity exaggerating a story for entertainment? Nobody outside the people involved can know for certain. But this is where the timing becomes interesting. The video was filmed years before the federal case eventually reached the courtroom. At that point, Diddy was still publicly one of the most influential figures in entertainment. His brand was built on confidence and control, and celebrity branding often involves carefully managing public perception. Family photos, charity events, children, emotional stories. All of these things can shape the way the public sees a powerful person. That does not mean the Ava video was part of a deliberate public relations campaign. There is no evidence establishing that, but it does show how easily a child's image can become part of a celebrity's public narrative. And once that narrative goes viral, the child may have no control over how people interpret it years later. Then the Diddy allegations changed everything. The reason Ava's old video is being re-examined now is because of everything that happened afterward. Diddy became the subject of multiple lawsuits and serious allegations. Then came the federal case. The public began hearing testimony and seeing evidence that dramatically changed how many people viewed him. One of the most significant developments involved Cassie Ventura. Cassie had previously filed a lawsuit accusing Diddy of years of abuse and control. Although that civil lawsuit was settled quickly, the allegations continued to generate public attention. Then surveillance footage from a 2016 incident became public. The video showed Diddy physically attacking Cassie in a hotel hallway. The footage was shocking because, unlike many allegations circulating online, the public could actually see the incident. Diddy later apologized for his behavior shown in the video. That moment fundamentally changed the conversation. For years, many people had dismissed rumors surrounding Diddy as celebrity gossip. But the video gave the public something undeniable to examine. It also caused people to revisit old interviews, social media clips, and stories involving his relationships. And that is exactly why the Ava footage returned to public attention. People began asking, if the public image was carefully controlled, what else had been presented differently from reality? Again, that does not mean Ava was harmed. It does not mean she witnessed a crime. And it does not mean the adoption video was connected to the criminal case. But it explains why the public suddenly became suspicious of something that may once have seemed harmless. The pattern of power and control. The broader Diddy case has raised serious questions about power dynamics in the entertainment industry. Cassie's allegations described a relationship in which she said she felt controlled. She described pressure, manipulation, violence, and fear. During legal proceedings, testimony and evidence presented in court painted a disturbing picture of the relationship. However, it is important to distinguish what was alleged, what was testified to, and what was legally established by the verdict. A criminal trial does not automatically confirm every allegation that appears online. Likewise, an acquittal on certain charges does not mean that every troubling event described during the proceedings never happened. This distinction matters because the Ava story has become attached to a much larger narrative. Online commentators have attempted to connect her to allegations involving other young people. Justin Bieber's name frequently appears in these discussions. Old footage showing a teenage Bieber around Diddy has resurfaced repeatedly. But Bieber has not publicly accused Diddy of sexually abusing him. His public discussions about the trauma of becoming famous at a young age should not automatically be attributed to one specific person without evidence. The same applies to Ava. The fact that she was young and connected to Diddy's family does not prove she was victimized. We have to be careful not to create another victim through speculation. Because accusing someone of experiencing abuse without evidence can also cause harm, especially if that person is trying to live a private life. So, where is Ava now? This is the question that continues appearing online. And the honest answer is simple. The public does not appear to know. There is no reliable reason to believe that Ava is missing. There is no confirmed evidence that she has been placed in witness protection. There is no public indication that she is a secret witness against Diddy. And there is no verified information suggesting that something happened to her. Her family may simply have decided to protect her privacy. If that is the case, it would make sense. Imagine being a young person whose name suddenly becomes attached to one of the most controversial celebrity cases in modern entertainment. Every photograph would be analyzed. Every social media account would be searched. Every family member could become the target of questions. Choosing privacy under those circumstances would not necessarily be suspicious. It might be the safest and healthiest decision possible. But the internet does not handle unanswered questions very well. Silence often becomes evidence. Privacy becomes secrecy. And the absence of information creates a vacuum that conspiracy theories are more than willing to fill. That is what appears to have happened here. Could Ava have seen something? There is another theory circulating online. Some people believe that because Ava reportedly spent time around Diddy's family, she may have witnessed something relevant to his case. Theoretically, anyone who spent significant time around a person could potentially witness important events. But there is currently no public evidence establishing that Ava has provided testimony or possesses information relevant to the criminal charges. Speculation about what a child may or may not have seen is especially problematic. A child should not be publicly transformed into an internet detective story. If Ava has information relevant to law enforcement, that would be a matter for investigators and attorneys. If she does not, then connecting her to criminal allegations could unfairly follow her for the rest of her life. This is where responsible coverage becomes important. There is a difference between asking why Diddy publicly called her his adopted daughter and claiming that she is a hidden witness in a federal investigation. The first is a legitimate question based on a public video. The second requires evidence. And so far, public speculation appears to go far beyond what has actually been confirmed. The court case and what happened to Diddy. The legal case against Diddy has been complicated and widely misunderstood online. The charges included extremely serious allegations. During the trial, the jury heard testimony from multiple witnesses. Some testimony described alleged violence, drug use, sexual encounters, financial arrangements, and relationships that prosecutors argued were part of a larger criminal operation. Ultimately, the verdict did not match every allegation presented by prosecutors. Diddy was convicted on 2 counts involving transportation to engage in prostitution. He was acquitted on the more serious sex trafficking and racketeering charges. The sentencing then became another major public moment. The court considered the evidence, the nature of the convictions, and testimony describing violence and abuse. Diddy's family also appeared and made emotional statements. His children pleaded for leniency. For them, the situation was deeply personal. They had already lost their mother, Kim Porter, and now they faced the possibility of spending years without their father. Whatever people think about Diddy, his children did not choose the situation. They did not choose the allegations. They did not choose the trial. And they now have to deal with the consequences of decisions made by adults around them. That reality is relevant to Ava's story too. Children and young people are often caught in the consequences of powerful adults. They become symbols, public relations tools, characters in documentaries, or subjects of internet speculation. But they rarely get to control the narrative. The Ava story is ultimately about image. Perhaps the most important thing about Ava's story is not where she is today. It is what happened in that video. A young girl was publicly introduced as an adopted daughter. A story was told about her being rescued from the streets. A famous celebrity became the hero of that story, and millions of people were invited to watch. Later, reports suggested that the adoption story was simply a joke, and that Ava actually had parents who remained responsible for her care. That should have been the end of the story. But then everything surrounding Diddy changed. Serious allegations emerged. Civil lawsuits followed. Federal investigators became involved. A criminal trial took place. And suddenly, every old piece of footage connected to him was being examined again. The Ava video became part of that re-examination, not because there is evidence that she was a victim, but because it demonstrated how different public storytelling can be from reality. The public was given one narrative: a rescued child, an adopted daughter, a generous father figure. But reports later suggested something much more ordinary: a family friend, a child who was close to Diddy's daughters, a joke that was presented as reality. And that gap between image and reality is what makes people uncomfortable. What happens next? For now, Ava remains a private individual, and unless she or her family chooses to speak publicly, there may be no additional information. That should be respected. If law enforcement believes she has relevant information, investigators have procedures for dealing with witnesses, especially young people. But the public does not need to know every detail of a child's life. The bigger story is the one surrounding celebrity power. How many people around powerful figures remain silent? How many uncomfortable moments are dismissed as jokes? How many public images are carefully constructed? And how often do children become part of stories they never asked to be included in? The Diddy case has forced the entertainment industry to confront difficult questions. Questions about power. Questions about control. Questions about who knew what. And questions about why certain stories were ignored for years. But it has also created another problem: the rush to connect every celebrity, every old video, and every mysterious story to criminal allegations. That approach can bury legitimate evidence beneath conspiracy theories. And when everything becomes suspicious, it becomes harder to identify what actually matters. The Ava video matters because it happened publicly. The adoption claim was made publicly, and the explanation that followed created an obvious contradiction between the story people heard and the reported reality. That is worth discussing. But everything beyond that requires evidence. The final thoughts. So where is Ava? The most honest answer is that we do not publicly know, and we may not be entitled to know. She may simply be living privately with her family. She may have moved on from the celebrity world completely. And considering the scale of the controversy surrounding Diddy, that may be the best possible outcome for her. But the questions surrounding that 2020 video will probably continue. Why call her an adopted daughter? Why create the story about rescuing her? Why use her as part of such a public performance? Was it simply an awkward joke? Or was it an example of a celebrity constructing an image for the audience? Until someone directly involved explains it, we cannot know. What we can say is that Ava should not become another fictional character in an internet conspiracy. She was a child, and that matters. The Diddy case will continue through appeals, legal arguments, and public debate. More information may emerge, more people may speak, and more old footage will almost certainly be examined. But when it comes to Ava, the evidence currently available supports far fewer conclusions than the internet would like us to believe. So perhaps the real question is not only, where is Ava? Perhaps the more important question is, how did one strange social media video become the foundation for so many theories? And what does that say about the way we now consume celebrity scandals? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the Ava adoption video was simply an awkward family joke? Or do you think there was a deliberate reason Diddy chose to publicly present her as his adopted daughter? Let me know what you think. And if new, verified information emerges about this story, we will examine it carefully, separating evidence from rumor and fact from speculation. Because in a story filled with allegations, theories, viral clips, and unanswered questions, the truth is the one thing that should never become just another piece of entertainment.